Hey everybody. As boring as it may sound, I'd like to spend just a little bit more time talking about Hillary Clinton's email problems. The reason for that is I think that the general public discussion about her emails has gone off the rails a little bit. And I'd like to kind of reorient the discussion. There's been a lot of talk lately about classified documents, secret documents, top secret documents. When were they classified? Did she know they were classified? What was actually on her server and how did it get on her server? And all of that discussion is appropriate for the FBI to explore. I mean, obviously, we want to know if any information was compromised. But that said, that is not the core, in my view, of the problem with Hillary's email setup. And to pursue this, what I'd like to do is start with a little thought experiment. Let us assume, just for the sake of exploration, that everything that Hillary has told us about her motivation in setting up a personal server is correct, is truthful. Let us assume that the reason she set up the server is simply she wanted to have a more convenient arrangement where all of her emails, both work and personal, could be gathered on the same digital platform, her BlackBerry. So she set up a personal server to accomplish that end. She had no other motivation. It was simple and perhaps a little naive, but simple. So if that were the case, this is what I would have expected Hillary to do. On February 1st, 2013, when she stepped down as Secretary of State, what I would have expected is for her to walk over to the IT department of the State Department, or whatever division would be appropriate, with a little USB drive in her hand, and say to the appropriate person, hey, I want you to know that I've been maintaining my own server for the last 4 years, and it contains 55,000 pages of emails that I've both sent and received. And I know this would be useful to you because I know that there's a large archiving division within the State Department that's responsible for documenting my entire stay in office and maintaining good records about my tenure as Secretary of State. And I know that from time to time there are going to be congressional committees looking for my work product and wanting documents from me. And in order for them to fulfill their role and for you to fulfill your role in providing documents from them, you need this thumb drive because all my emails are on it and you may not have them all. And I also know that there are numerous news organizations, historians, academics of various sorts, watchdog groups, and just curious and interested people that want to look at my thought process as Secretary of State, my decision-making process, and go over my tenure as Secretary with a fine-tooth comb. So here's your thumb drive. Here are my documents. Here are my emails. Sorry I didn't get them to you sooner. Okay. Now, if Hillary does that, I'm prepared to accept her explanation. It was a matter of convenience. You know, she held back a little bit, but at the appropriate time, when she knew that she was no longer going to be the Secretary of State, she realized that these documents weren't really her documents, they were the government's documents. And so she felt an obligation to provide them. What did Hillary do? Nothing of the sort. Upon leaving, she sat on the documents. She sat on the information. Very few people knew that she had a private server. And it wasn't until over a year later in 2014, when Benghazi became a raging issue, that the Benghazi Committee, which was functioning like a dog with a bone in its mouth, began to make more demands of the State Department, wondering where were Hillary's emails. And it was at that point that the State Department realized, oh, there are all these emails that seem to be floating around under the clintonemail.com domain. And that was the point at which the State Department lawyers contacted Hillary and said, you apparently have documents that we don't have. Please give them over. And then after that, they issued this kind of general request for all past secretaries of state to kind of give Hillary a little cover. But the person they were really interested in was Hillary. So what I'm getting at is really quite clear. For 5 years, Hillary maintained this server, didn't publicize it, kept 55,000 pages of emails, and kept the State Department in the dark about the emails. Hillary was essentially walling her emails off and deceiving her own department about the nature of her work product. So requests would come in, for example, the Associated Press, which is suing the State Department right now, started filing Freedom of Information requests for Hillary's emails in 2009. And they were stonewalled by the State Department, unwittingly apparently, because the State Department would say, we're giving you everything we have. We don't have anything else. So Hillary and Cheryl Mills, her assistant, and Huma Abedin were essentially scamming the State Department so that the State Department could not get a hold of Hillary's emails. And the only way that they found out about them is that the Benghazi Committee became so insistent that it sort of cut through all the subterfuge, and the State Department began to realize what was going on. Now you might say, well, geez, the State Department should have known. They were asleep at the wheel. Yes, they probably should have. But that doesn't in any way diminish Hillary's responsibility in the whole thing. And to be completely fair to Hillary, Hillary would defend herself this way. She would say, well, what do you mean I was hiding my emails? What do you mean I was deceiving everybody as to my work product? They have all my emails. Anytime I send an email to somebody, it's in their file. So actually all my emails are on the government system. Well, first of all, are you really asking the State Department IT division to aggregate your emails by doing a massive search through everybody at the State Department to find out if you ever sent this person an email or that person an email? I'm not sure that their software would allow them to do that, but even if it did, it would be a massive undertaking. And what person who's really conscientious about transparency and record keeping would really create that kind of a burden for the State Department? I mean, that's an explanation that doesn't wash at all. So what I'm suggesting is that when the FBI eventually comes back, or some investigating body files a report on this, it may have very little to do with the issue of classified documents. I mean, they may come back and say, yeah, there were some documents that turned out to be classified later, but the national security was not at risk. Hillary was not giving out the nuclear codes. But what they probably will say is that Hillary and her associates had cooked up a scheme, a ruse, a bit of subterfuge to keep anybody from being able to see her emails. And it was a ruse that went on for 5 years and might have gone on forever had it not been caught. Now, I find that reprehensible. Now, everybody who watches my blogs on a regular basis knows that I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter. So don't take my word for this. There's a guy named Dan Metcalf who for 25 years was the Justice Department's director of the Office of Information and Privacy. The Office of Information and Privacy is responsible for processing, overseeing, managing, making legal judgments about all the freedom of information requests that come in. So the person who's most involved in implementing freedom of information requests has been, over the past 25 years, Dan Metcalf. And here's what Dan Metcalf has to say about Hillary's emails. She managed successfully to insulate her office emails categorically from the Freedom of Information Act, both during her tenure at State and long after her departure from it, perhaps forever. And what he means by perhaps forever is all of the circumstantial evidence suggests that Hillary would have kept those emails in perpetuity if she had not been found out. There's nothing to suggest that she was going to give them out unless somebody came demanding them, which makes it all the more nervy now when she gets up on a stage and demands that the State Department release everything. She wants everything to be released. She's done something that no Secretary of State has ever done before. She's still acting as if those are her emails. They're not her emails. They're the government's emails. And so she pretends that she's doing everybody a favor by releasing them. Metcalf continues, any FOIA request that requires an agency first to locate responsive email messages sent to or from that agency's head, for instance, is necessarily dependent on those records being locatable in the first place. And an agency simply cannot do that properly for any emails, let alone all such emails that have been created and are maintained entirely beyond the agency's reach. Or as is sometimes said cynically in the FOIA community, you can't disclose what you can't find. Says Metcalf, it was a blatant circumvention of the FOIA by someone who unquestionably knows better. You can't put it any more clearly than that. Now, there are a couple other pieces that add to my misgivings about this. In my initial thought experiment, I talked about Hillary delivering a thumb drive to the IT department. Well, what happened when they made the request? Well, they didn't get a thumb drive. They didn't get the documents in any usable, manipulable, digital form. What they got were 55,000 pages of hard copy in a bunch of boxes delivered to the State Department offices. I mean, you couldn't have created a bigger problem for the people responsible for rummaging through these documents. It took them 5 weeks just to scan everything. I mean, is that the behavior of somebody who's really interested in transparency? I don't think so. So I repeat, when we spend all this time talking about classified, overclassified, secret, top secret documents, we're missing the forest for the trees. This was a clear attempt by the head of the State Department to hide her emails from the public. And it should be recognized as such. And one of the ironies for me is, you know who the person is who I think is most responsible for helping Hillary dodge and escape this issue? Bernie Sanders. That's right, Bernie Sanders. Bernie seems to be spending 90% of his time focusing on Hillary's speeches to Wall Street and Goldman Sachs in particular. Now, I think that, getting $200,000 for 1 hour speeches is unseemly, greedy, unwise if you're thinking of running for president. But I don't think in principle that it's unethical. That is, I think theoretically you could give such a speech and then go about your business in an honorable way afterward. I don't think that happens very often. I think the overwhelming likelihood is that such speaking fees tend to corrupt you and tend to bias you in favor of the people that are feeding you with lots of money. But in principle, it's possible. Scamming the State Department about your emails is intrinsically unethical and should be recognized as such. And I might point out, Hillary has left a mess, a crap storm behind her. Why do I say that? Because there are 50 lawsuits pending right now, all from the kinds of organizations that I named earlier, Associated Press, Judicial Watch, Vice News. All these people have been vying for Hillary's work product for 5 years and have been getting stiffed by the State Department. All of them feel ripped off. All of them feel lied to. Now, whether the State Department was lying or whether the State Department was being entirely truthful as a result of Hillary's subterfuge, I can't say. Only the investigators will tell us that eventually. But my point is, she left a complete mess behind her, and it really doesn't get a whole lot of coverage, and it should. Now, the last thing I want to say about Dan Metcalf, who is an authority about FOIA requests, he also came out and said, and I want to emphasize this because I share his view. He said, and if Hillary becomes the nominee of the Democratic Party, I, Dan Metcalf, will support her. Well, I, Jeff Rowan, feel the same way. Of course I would support Hillary. It's all relative. Compared to the likes of Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Hillary is a saint. But if you apply a real standard of ethics to Hillary, the kind that's applied in Democratic circles, Hillary comes up significantly short. So Metcalf is not some part of the vast right-wing conspiracy out to get Hillary. He's a Democrat who wants to nominate the best possible person that he can. And since I brought up the vast right-wing conspiracy, I believe there's a vast right-wing conspiracy. And I want to close with this thought. The problem with Hillary and the vast right-wing conspiracy is that my concern about her is that she is so often intent on cutting corners, doing things that are borderline legal but clearly unethical, that she's constantly throwing ammunition, throwing raw meat out to the vast right-wing conspiracy. She gives them more things to scream about than any other 5 candidates you could ever imagine. So that's why I want to raise a little red flag here and say, Hillary's email scandal is real. I'm Jeff Rowan. Thanks for watching.